Alright, so now we have the origin story of Wonder Woman, and it's firmly been established. So now we're going to move away from that and get into something entirely different. It's time for us to get into her first major clash with a supervillain. Of course, I'm talking about the God of War Ares, as I mentioned in the previous episode. Except in the golden age of comics, it's important that you understand that he was known as Mars, which is the Roman name for Ares. The story I'm talking about comes from Wonder Woman's second issue, as we can see here in this opening transcript. Mars is not working alone in this issue. He is accompanied by three vile henchmen known as the Earl of Greed, the Duke of Deception, and the Count of Conquest. So this issue is actually split into 4 separate adventures in which Wonder Woman does battle against Mars and then his 3 henchmen. It's sort of like a crucible of sorts for the character, which pushes her to her limits and establishes the benchmark for all the Wonder Woman stories that would come after. So in this episode, as well as the next few episodes, we're going to be covering this titanic saga and see where it takes us. But before we get into that, we have to learn some facts about Mars to give us a better idea of who exactly Wonder Woman is facing. First things first, we need to know that Mars is an Olympian god, which grants him a few abilities. Much like Wonder Woman, he is effectively immortal and indestructible, as well as incredibly strong and fast. As the god of war, he has the ability to manipulate darkness and fire to his will. He also has the more devious power of mind control. Mars often uses his abilities to warp the minds of men into following the ways of war, even at the cost of their own lives. To this end, he is also capable of invading other people's minds with telepathy, as well as casting illusions to deceive his foes. Over the years, he has used these skills to build himself an army of fanatically devoted followers. These followers are warriors from various backgrounds and skill levels who have abandoned their previous lives to follow the path of war, often in exchange for the promise of power. This is a trick, however, because followers of Mars always lose their own humanity in the process and end up craving greater and greater conflicts in an insatiable lust for more conquest. Eventually, at the highest level, these followers become so indoctrinated that they begin to take on traits of Mars himself, including the top-tier generals in his armies who are able to wield less potent forms of his powers. Mars is also a master of combat. He is proficient in all weapons and a master of every form of warfare since the dawn of mankind, and even beyond that. He was there for every conflict since the beginning of time and has gained near limitless experience as a warrior. And as a result, he carries the best weapons and armor in existence. Having said all that, it may seem that Mars is like an unstoppable being, but he has one critical weakness. Like all the Olympic gods, his power is directly tied to how many followers he has. His power grows as more people devote themselves to war, and his power weakens as people turn to the path of love. For this reason, Mars is often locked in a never-ending struggle against Aphrodite as they both fight for the souls of mankind. In many ways, this is the only way in which Wonder Woman can harm Mars. Physically, she can't destroy him. And as a god, his death would never be permanent. This means Wonder Woman is forced into this never-ending battle against the ideals of war and conquest, fighting on behalf of Aphrodite and her ideals of love and compassion. And I want you to remember that because it is the central idea of who Wonder Woman is at the very core of her character. She is a warrior fighting in a never-ending struggle for the cause of humanity's salvation. It's a very compelling narrative, and one that is definitely worthy of the fame of the character. So now that we've understood all that, we can finally get into the story, and let me tell you, it's a whopper of a tale, so, strap in for this one. As the story begins, we learn a few very important facts about Mars. First of all, Mars does not live on the planet Mars. he has an interplanetary base where he keeps watch over Earth and humanity and trains and is building his ever-growing army of deadly warriors. Mars is examining the conflict on Earth. Specifically, he has been keeping an eye on the events of the Great War, and things aren't going as planned. His spies are failing in their missions, and it's all the fault of Wonder Woman. So Mars decides on a dastardly plan to get back at Wonder Woman through none other than Steve Trevor. Back on Earth, Steve is given a highly secretive assignment with dastardly undertones, and Wonder Woman is immediately suspicious. Wonder Woman rushes off to catch Steve at the airport, but he can't be persuaded to abandon the mission. Unfortunately, it turns out Wonder Woman was correct about the mission, because Steve once again goes missing during the mission, meaning Diana Prince has to go and find him. Twice now, Steve has put himself in danger so that Wonder Woman can go and save him. He really is like the Lois Lane of this series, and I don't say that with any sarcasm. That is the role that he plays in these stories, literally. It's a classic role reversal where the male lead becomes a damsel and the female hero needs to rescue him, one that was quite refreshing. Now comes the inciting incident of the story. Wonder Woman calls upon Aphrodite to locate Steve, and Aphrodite explains that Steve has passed away and now lives in the domain of Mars. Then she gives Wonder Woman a sleeping potion so she can go into a state of suspended animation and rescue Steve from the afterlife. Wonder Woman isn't in Mars's domain for long before she gets captured. Instead of fighting, she decides to willfully submit herself so she can infiltrate Mars's army and find Steve. They take her aboard one of their ships and begin to indoctrinate her as one of their slaves. I find this fascinating because they take her in even though she is obviously Wonder Woman. Like, she has her costume on and everything. Mars gave specific orders to find and eliminate Wonder Woman. But, I don't know, perhaps they don't even know what she looks like because she just has no problem infiltrating their ranks. Wonder Woman is forced into a series of trials to test her capabilities as a soldier. Of course, they have no idea that she has superpowers, so she ends up greatly exceeding their expectations to comedic effect. And now it's time for a tournament. All the slaves must compete against each other to see what rank they will achieve in Mars's domain. Of course, Wonder Woman has no problem competing, but when she comes face to face with another female slave, she decides to be merciful and spare the poor soul. Then she shows her great skill by defeating one of Mars's top lieutenants in hand-to-hand combat. Mars is so impressed by Wonder Woman's strength that he allows her to challenge his greatest swordsman, a man named Satan. Wonder Woman clashes with Satan on horseback, and of course, she wins the battle, dealing a defeating blow while shouting praises to the goddess Aphrodite. Mars hears this and realizes that Wonder Woman is a spy for his sworn enemy Aphrodite. He hatches a plan to destroy her by inviting her to a banquet at his massive metal castle and presents Wonder Woman with a slave of her own. Wonder Woman has no desire to own a slave, but this slave just happens to know where Steve Trevor is being held. Together, they go into the night to release Steve from captivity, but it turns out to be a trap, and they are forced to swiftly flee from the metal castle down into the docks, where they find a boat which they can use to escape. Wonder Woman uses her strength to avoid capture by Mars and his warriors, and together they escape his domain. Steve explains that he died when his co-pilot turned out to be a Japanese spy. His body is recovered in the real world and revived. Then the story ends with Wonder Woman using her lasso of truth to explain to Steve that Mars will send more henchmen after them, so the next time he goes on a mission, he should bring her along. And that's all there is for this first appearance of Mars. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's such an abrupt ending. But remember that this is just one of 4 parts which were all featured in the same issue. Wonder Woman happens to narrowly escape Mars here, but she still has the Earl of Greed, the Duke of Deception, and the Count of Conquest to take care of. And as for Mars, he will definitely return, in many stories throughout the long history of the character. This Golden Age form is a bit banal and kind of silly, but at the core of the character, Mars is all about humanity's darker impulses. He represents the savage part of the human being, which desires to grow and conquer and consume. Of course, that is what makes the character so compelling. What human can't relate to those feelings, you know? What human wouldn't be tempted by Mars's promise of power? Who wouldn't be inspired by his endless strength? But of course, those tropes can lead to some pretty dark places, and that is what makes Mars not only a great character, but a great villain. So that's it for now. Thanks everybody for reading this comic with me. If you would like to read more comics with me, then be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you feel so compelled to support me, I have a Patreon that you can donate to. But until next time, nerds, stay heroic.